to the front of the Daily Mirror, which they say is a PR stunt by David Cameron. What's your feeling about this one, you two?
This is just such a depressing story. I mean, what we've got, in one corner we've got the Daily Mirror, and the other corner we've got the Sun. The Daily Mirror are clearly backing Brown, the Sun are clearly backing Cameron. And this is just a really cheap, nasty sting. It's a picture of David Cameron outside Westminster Abbey, looking at the sort of the crosses and all of the wreaths have been laid for the fallen service personnel, and it's basically a sting. They've got a cameraman who is with Cameron taking a picture of Cameron laying these wreaths, and they're saying that it's a setup. And Cameron, of course, has got a pretty bad reputation for photo calls. We've seen in the past, you know, his photo calls with the Huskies and all those sorts of things, and it reinforces the perception that this is a shallow guy who's all about the image rather than the story. But the truth of this is that this is about the Mirror trying to get one up on the Sun. We've seen the Sun, which is now backing Cameron, really laying into Brown the last few days, frankly in a violent, fairly pernicious way, and the Mirror trying to get their own back. And what I worry about is that we are going to spend the next 6 months up until the general election in a battle over who said what, when they said it, all the rest of it. This is not going to be about policy, it's going to be about
it's the punch and Judy politics that Paddy Ashdown talked about, isn't it?
Well, it is.
So
The fact of the matter is all politicians have photographers following them around. There's another picture of Gordon and Sarah Brown in the Mail looking at virtually the same crosses that Cameron is looking at. Are the Mirror saying that Gordon Brown shouldn't have his picture taken when he's looking at this?
But this is his own photographer. That's the problem here.
Well, the Prime Minister has his own photographer following him around. This is, I mean,
the Mirror says it's cynical. The only thing that's cynical is the way the Mirror is exploiting on Armistice Day David Cameron.
Well, it absolutely is. I would actually quite like to see the leader of the opposition paying his respect to the war dead in this way. And does it really matter whether it's his own photographer or one from a national newspaper? It's a disgusting story.
You talked about the Sun. Lord Mandelson is certainly smelling a rat, isn't he? Which is what the Independent dwells on.
Well, they do, and I mean, again, I think this is a non-story. For Peter Mandelson, of all people, to accuse the Conservatives of courting Rupert Murdoch, I mean, do we not remember Tony Blair jetting all the way around the world to do exactly the same thing? And he's saying there's some sort of contract between Rupert Murdoch and the Conservatives. What he's actually trying to insinuate is that the Conservatives were behind that awful Sun story this week about Gordon Brown. Nothing could be further from the truth. Every Conservative politician I know thinks it was an absolutely disgusting thing to do.
But Iain, isn't this a bit of a Faustian pact between, on the one hand, Murdoch and Wade, on the other hand, Coulson and Cameron? Because last week, Cameron made what was a pretty big U-turn on the Lisbon Treaty. He said there wouldn't be a referendum. He said no more letdown for the British people. We won't let this happen again. And yet today, so they let him off the hook. And yet today,
well, actually, it wasn't a U-turn because he never promised a referendum after ratification. Let's get that clear.
But today, he was not, as far as I heard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he was not criticising the Sun as just about everybody else was doing on the absolutely cynical and vile way they exploited that poor lady who lost her son in Afghanistan.
Well, as I say,
and that's the Faustian pact that he's made, and that's the
no,
danger.
I'm
What
sorry, it absolutely isn't. No Conservative politician I know has said anything to approve of what the Sun has done this week.
It's not about saying approving, it's whether you disapprove, and Nick Clegg disapproved, lots of Labour benches disapproved. Where are the Conservatives coming out saying...
If David Cameron had used his questions on Afghanistan in Prime Minister's questions, fine, he may have said it, but he didn't. He used them all about youth unemployment. I mean, are you seriously telling me that you would have expected him to raise this in that way in Prime Minister's
What I'm saying is trust in politics is at an absolutely low ebb, and what we need to hear from our political leaders is that going into the next election, what they're going to talk about is policy, how they're going to rectify the economy, how they're going to support the NHS, and I think the way that the Sun has clearly backed Cameron and the way that he has tacitly backed them is going to actually backfire. I mean, I know we're straying a little bit here, but I think it's a really important issue, and it's going to get bigger towards the election.
You cannot say in any way that David Cameron has tacitly or covertly or overtly supported what the Sun did this week. He just hasn't.
Well, he hasn't said anything against it. Well, I for one, would genuinely like to hear David Cameron come out and say...
You as a Lib Dem would no doubt think it was wonderful for Nick Clegg to say that at PMQs. David Cameron chose to go on an entirely different subject, the highest youth unemployment we've ever had. I think that was entirely legitimate
The point being, it's going to be a very hard-fought election campaign. Jobs will be a big issue, so will the current war in Afghanistan, which brings us back, if you don't mind, to the Independent, which is the fact that people are now calling for a vote on the war in Afghanistan. What would that achieve?
Well, I don't think a vote would actually achieve anything, because if it was a fairly tight vote, it would actually undermine the armed forces. What I think these 4 ex-ministers who are calling for a vote should be doing is actually saying there should be a parliamentary debate rather than having a vote at the end of it. And we should be having debates on these huge issues. The fact that I can't remember the last time we had a debate on the economy. When the Iraq war was going on, there were very few parliamentary debates. The country actually wants Parliament to debate the subjects that the country is talking about down at the Dog and Duck, and at the moment that's just not happening.
I'll go one further. I mean, people misunderstand the war in Afghanistan. The political leaders have not sold the last 8 years to the people. We're seeing people coming back, service personnel coming back in body bags. Yes, have a parliamentary debate, but our politicians in America and the UK need to do a darn sight better at convincing people, A, why our troops should be there, and B, why there should be a surge.
And that's actually what Gerald Howarth was saying in PMQs today. He actually asked a question directly to the PM, saying, you've got to tell people that we are winning this war. There are good things happening in Afghanistan, but you're not getting the message across.
OK, lots more still ahead, including find out what could be the next job for the Business Secretary, Lord Mandelson.